On April 5th, 2010, roughly 1,000 feet underground in Raleigh County, West Virginia, at Massey Energy's Upper Big Branch coal mine, 29 out of 31 coal miners were killed. 327 yesterday. They knew originally about 25 of them, and then found out there were 4 more that they actually had walked past within a few days. A state-funded independent investigation would later find Massey Energy directly responsible for the blast. And there's a guy that's been in the news a lot this week who apparently made a mockumentary about the disaster. The former head of the former company that was responsible for those deaths. Personally, I don't like his name getting all the press. So I wanted to remember the miners' names by reading them here. I included them in the owner's service, and if you feel like it, you're more than welcome to read them along with me. I think it's pretty important. Carl Calvin Accord, Jason Atkins, Christopher Bell, Gregory Stephen Brock, Kenneth Allen Chapman, Robert E. Clark, Cody Thomas Davis, Charles Timothy Davis, Michael Lee Ellswick, William L. Griffith, Stephen Herring, Edward Dean Jones, Richard K. Lane, William Roosevelt Lynch, Joe Barker, Ronald Lee Maynard, Nicholas Darrell McCroskey, James E. Eddie Moody, Adam Keith Morgan, Rex L. Mullins, Joshua Napier, Howard D. Payne, Dillard Earl Persinger, Joel R. Price, Gary Wayne Quarles, Deward Allen Scott, Grover Dale Skeens, Benny Ray Nolan, Ricky Workman. Speaker today, Anoa Chenga. Anoa is a lawyer, is a mother of 2, has lived here about 4 years, went to WVU. Previous to that, moved here from Chicago, where she worked with public housing assistance. First met her right here. We were doing a legislative training meeting about the water crisis, and I was astounded as soon as she opened her mouth, quite frankly. I know it is I'm gonna just let her words speak for herself. She really amazed me when I heard her speak, and when we decided to do a service about the water and the environment, she was my first pick. She really was. Anoa?
Hopefully my words will be astounding. I must admit, I am a little nervous this morning, but thank you all for having me. As Paul said, my name is Anoa Chenga. I moved here 4 years ago with my 2 children, Max and Nayla. They're 12 and 10. And we immediately became a part of the Charleston community. We moved here from Chicago in part because Charleston is more of a family-friendly, community-oriented place to be. And up until January 9th, I was very pleased with our decision to be here. Through the kids, I've been very involved with youth football. My son plays in Kanawha City. My daughter's in 4-H, and my son's in Boy Scouts. So we've been active in various aspects of community life here. But in thinking about the water crisis and what I would say today to everyone, I reflected on my own experiences as a single mom, raising 2 kids, and thinking about how water is so intrinsic into every single aspect of our lives. So we could have a whole just day-long discussion about my experience, your experience, because even though we were all affected by the same incident, the same singular event, it affected us all very differently. And I think thinking about our collective experience and how we move from being affected by the negligence of Freedom Industries, as some would say, the mismanagement of our elected and appointed officials, how do we move past that to create real sustainable, meaningful change long term so that we prevent another incident like this or any of the others that have befallen this area in the past several years. I mean, the Chemical Safety Board, for example, has been here 3 times for 3 separate incidents in the past 6 years. And still, we've had to have this huge push, this fight that has been citizen-driven to kind of get legislators, to get our elected officials, our appointed officials, to really start thinking more critically about how they're protecting our resources and how they're protecting us. And just taking a step back and thinking about some of the different sound bites that we've been given over the past 3 months. I mean, there still has not been any one person, whether it's the head of the Department of Environmental Protection or the head of Health and Human Resources, or whether it's been our illustrious public health official. No one has said this, the buck stops here. You know, I'm willing to take responsibility and give you the answers you need. We as a community, as citizens, have had to push every step of the way to get information, to get a determination of what is safe, to find out, is this rash that my child is now having, is this somehow connected? And even still, all along the way, we've had pushback by the people who are supposed to serve and protect us. Now, why is this important that we hold government leadership, whether it's at the local level, the state level, elected or appointed? Why is it important that we hold them accountable for what we're all experiencing as individuals? I've heard a lot of people say, well, I can take care of myself. I don't need government. True, but it's not an issue whether you need government or not. It's an issue of there are certain rights and responsibilities, and people have certain duties, and we need to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. Now, when I was talking about this with my dad, trying to figure out exactly kind of more what to say, we began a conversation about the social contract, going back to philosophy, thinking about how when man comes out of nature, we enter a contract with each other and with an organizational structure for certain rights and protections. And as a part of this, we give up certain freedoms that we would normally have if we were just in nature by ourselves, but then in turn, we're supposed to get certain protections as an exchange. This gets more complicated in modern society where we have industrial interests or corporate interests that are now intervening kind of in our ordinary relationship. And it becomes even more important for us to advocate for ourselves. So in this instance, we have, as we saw with going through the legislative process with Senate Bill 373, it seemed like it was a no-brainer. We have a chemical spill, there's a need to protect people, we should just have the best bill possible. But every step of the way going through that process, you had citizens groups, whether they're just individual average soccer moms or actual seasoned environmental activists who had to push to get the legislature to do the right thing to protect the 3,000 affected and people in other communities across the state. Why? Because industry advocates wanted something very different. Now, we can't just rely and hope that people will do the right thing. That even in this tragedy that we've all just experienced, we still had to fight to make sure things were done accordingly. And this is why we have a need to really push forward, whether it's individual personal self-determination, defining for ourselves what is safe, what is acceptable, whether it's community empowerment, civic engagement, looking at how we can help not just a group of individuals such as ourselves who are willingly here and somewhat knowledgeable about the incident, but other people outside of these small groupings that we keep bringing together. One recurring theme has been, how can we reach outside to members of the other nine affected areas, the rest of the affected areas outside of Charleston? How do we organize to have sustained groupings of active individuals? How do we reach out to people who aren't as plugged in maybe into whether it's their local congregation or a Facebook group or some other means of getting information? How do we empower other people to be active participants? Because the only way that I see things changing, being able to have actual real planning, real advocacy around environmental issues, is if we have a more engaged citizenry, more communication, not just from the top down, but also from the bottom up. We need more people actively involved. And it doesn't take, I mean, I know most of us work, we don't necessarily have a huge amount of time to really be out there pounding the pavement, but there are still simple things that we can do, whether it's writing a quick email, or if you can't go to an evening meeting, there are different ways that you can find out, how can I get my voice heard, or how can I come together with a group of other individuals, because it's really in that collective action that we have the most input, the impact. Even simple strategies like filing the PSC complaints that we keep hearing people talk about. I mean, one of the biggest issues that we've had, the pushback we get, especially from West Virginia American Water, is that this is just an aesthetic issue. Well, I mean, exactly. Quality, you know, the fact that I can't use my water without smell, and for those of us who are sensitive to smell, whether it's just a mild irritation or a headache, or actually if you're an asthmatic or someone else who has other breathing issues, these are very serious issues that aren't being taken into consideration. If you're someone who's predisposed to various different ailments, having abdominal pain can be a very serious setback for you. And this is the type of thing that we have to continue to keep in the dialogue. We can't just, you know, the public health failure of this whole thing, you know, they seem to be vindicated now that, okay, we did everything, it's blowing over, but what happens the next time that something accidentally gets into, whether it's the water, what happens if there's an accidental release in the air, what's going to happen next? And do we want to wait to find out what happens next? Or do we want to try to be as proactive as possible now to ensure that we have done everything possible and imaginable going forward? I mean, going through this whole past few months and trying to decide when it was okay for my kids to even shower again. Or could I send my daughter in the kitchen to do the dishes for me? I mean, that does cause you a little degree of anxiety. And why should I have to feel that way when I'm required to contract services for something I can't even use? I mean, we need to hold people accountable. And whether that's our governor. I mean, I just think back to in Georgia when they had the big ice storm and everyone was stranded. You have all these people stranded in Atlanta. They messed up. It was a colossal mistake. They evacuated the whole city at the same time. There are people stranded on the highway. You have people sleeping in supermarkets. You have kids stranded in schools and on school buses. Parents walking to get their kids. And at first, everyone, oh, it's not my issue. Oh, we didn't. But eventually, after a few days, the governor, being the leader, had to say the buck stops here. I'm responsible. Ultimately, this is my mistake. I apologize, and we will do better the next time. The next ice storm they had a few weeks later, there was an improvement in the handling of the whole situation. We have yet to have any semblance of real leadership in this situation, and we are 3 months in. No one has said, except for the various community leaders who have stood up. You know, we've had some delegates and we've had some senators who've been able to stand up and say we need to do something, but we have not had any real top-level leadership say the buck stops here. This is unacceptable. Even when we're looking at a situation with the FEMA denial, we had a situation where FEMA was providing resources to the area in terms of water and other assistance. That stopped at a certain point. But instead of saying, okay, we're still going to work towards getting this assistance reinstated for people, but there's still an issue, the buck stops here, we're going to provide for West Virginians because that's what we're going to do. No, it was, oh well, you're on your own. And that's where the strength of our community groups, the strength of our congregations, of our families really comes into play, to fill in the void that is lacking. And as we continue to build our movement, it's getting easier to remember that the weather's nice again. It's getting easy to kind of forget what has happened. And the more and more we go forward, the easier it is to forget how difficult that first few weeks was in particular. And while you don't have to dwell, you don't have to remain frustrated, at the same time, always remember how easy it was for things to fall into discord, how unorganized, how unmotivated leadership seemed to be to resolve this issue for us. So what do we do going forward? There are various opportunities to get involved and to do different things. Right now, the Kanawha County Health Department, for example, is looking for volunteers to help do a county-wide survey on the health and economic impact of this incident on people. Going forward, the Senate bill required source water protection plans to be created. There is a piece of that requires citizen participation. We are going to need people who are interested and involved in these processes to participate to make sure we actually have a meaningful plan that does not just suit the interests of West Virginia American Water, but also meets the needs and interests of everyone across the valley. And these planning processes are really important because this is the type of planning that should have been done before. It is disingenuous to say, oh, we had no clue that was there. It's a mile upriver. It's not that far away. The Gazette, I think in the beginning of, well, the end of January, the Gazette had an article with a quote when the water filtration plant was first built, stating that that plant was going to be able to help provide clean water, basically, regardless of whatever chemical contaminants existed in the valley. So there is at least an understanding of where we live and what challenges there are to provide that service. And we can't just let people say, oh, I didn't know. When you're managing a public resource, when you're providing for public good on such a large scale, I didn't know, or I had no clue, is absolutely unacceptable. And that is what we need to continue to press upon people. It is not acceptable in any format. It's not a political thing. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's just a basic human decency thing. I mean, water is a basic human need and right. We are in the middle of the year of the water with the UN. I mean, this is very important worldwide, and there's no reason why in our great democracy that is the United States of America, we have people who have to fight so hard to get basic, clean, potable water. I mean, it's just a simple fact. And I think branching out, looking out from our own exposure here, right? Maybe some of you already knew, I know I was not aware of the situation in Printer or Bud, West Virginia. And there's so many other impacted communities across the state. How do we, having been at the center of this incident, begin to help other communities across the state build a broader coalition for access to clean water, for asserting their basic rights? We allow the government to basically control us to some extent in exchange for certain things like water, electricity, basic aspects of life. When that's not being met, the government is not doing its job. And yes, they've contracted out to this company or that company, that's fine. But you cannot abdicate your responsibility. The buck stops with our elected and appointed officials, and we have to hold them accountable. And I really think when we look at collective action, collective work and responsibility, it is on us as a whole. We can't wait for freedom to get their act together to do right. I mean, that we could be waiting forever. It's like being in the desert waiting for a rainstorm. It is affecting us. We have some onus in all this too, because we've just allowed elected officials to do whatever they please for whatever reason. They're elected by us, so they're answerable to us. Appointed officials they respond to the governor, but even still, they're not guaranteed to be there either. And these are the things that we need to organize around. community empowerment, civic engagement, making sure that we are engaged and part of ongoing processes to make sure there's sustainable, actual change occurring in our communities. And public accountability, making sure that we hold public officials accountable, whether they're appointed officials or elected officials, because there is this incident, the past 3 months, has been a huge example of inaction, lack of concern, and ineptitude on several different levels. I mean, to get on TV and say to people, I'm sorry if your kids are sick, but you're probably just having anxiety or you're paranoid, you know, it's uncalled for. And whether you really agree or believe, to say, well, in testimony in front of, you know, a U.S. House committee that, well, my water's fine, again, it's not acknowledging your role. It's not about you as an individual. When you are leading in a community, it's not about you as an individual. I, as an individual, can say, well, my water has been fine. I am okay. I can use it just fine from day one. That does not take into consideration my neighbor, who may have different piping, she may be slightly elevated compared to me. I mean, there's so many different nuances in this whole situation that are overlooked that completely disregards, you know, people's lived experiences. And that is what happens the farther out we get from ground zero, from day one, the more and more that information is not captured, the more and more we ignore people's lived experiences, the more and more we ignore the real social impact of this entire ordeal. I mean, I don't know if I've talked long enough. But I mean, just thinking about this, like, cause I can get up here and I can go back through the whole timeline but we've all lived it. By this point, we've all read several articles, we've all lived it, we've heard the 1 part per million versus the 120 now part per billion from the West Virginia TAP group. I mean, the bottom line is, regardless of what standard people are giving us, we need to have real, actual information, not these great arbitrary standards we're throwing out. You know, people will say, oh, you know, it's really not that much crude MCHM in the water. Don't be worried. It's only like a drop in a pool. Okay, that really doesn't mean anything though, because a drop in a pool, if it's the right concentration of the right chemical, can cause a huge issue. I remember in undergrad, I went to this hot sauce shop. And we were in this shop and we were trying different hot sauces and stuff. And the guy comes out, because we're being real daring, he's like, oh, you think you're bad, huh? So he comes out with this little vial. And it's just a concentrated liquid from like the hottest pepper in the world or something like that. And it's inside of another container, because you can't actually touch the vial itself with your bare hands. You have to handle it with gloves. So he gets on his gloves and stuff, and we're looking at him, and he takes it out the container, and he opens up the little vial, and you don't even put a drop. It's just just a minuscule amount. And he was telling us that you put that, if you're making a big stock pot of chili, you only put like the teeniest amount of this liquid in the chili to make it hot. That's how concentrated it is. And that's this example of the 1 drop in the pool. It doesn't matter that if I put 1 drop of peroxide in the pool, okay, yeah, no big. But if I put 1 drop of something that's some unknown toxic chemical in the pool, we have no clue what that could do. Why? Because no one's tested it. No one knows anything, and for anyone to dissuade any of your feelings, ideas, thoughts, or concerns with such vague references, it's irresponsible. And going through all of this, the one thing I have learned is to trust my gut, because my gut has steered me the right way. When I got home and my son was vomiting because he made hot chocolate after school, my gut told me, okay, we had heard this stuff, even after we were cleared, and the kids are like, my eyes are burning, Mommy, when you're running the water. My gut told me to stop using it. And I'm not going to use it until I can't smell this anymore. That's what my gut told me, regardless of what anyone on TV is saying. And that's what we have to do. We have to trust our gut, we have to support each other, and we have to come together to hold people accountable. Because that's the only way I think that things will change and continue forward. So that's when I think about lessons learned from the water crisis, it is the strength in community, the strength in families, and the power of people. So, thank you.